Welcome, biology. This is the final PowerPoint presentation on your final and final in the class. So, congratulations, you made it this far. I know it looked like it may be a long journey with this social distancing and online learning and everything. I just want to thank you all for the process, the patience, and the adaptation. So, as we've learned, animals have to adapt in order to survive, and that's just pretty much what we are doing. So, covering the second part, all right, I already went over the tests and things like that. So, if you want information on that, one, read your study guide. It's at the first part on the test breakdown, or two, look at the last video. I'm going to jump into it a little bit more because there's a lot more to cover here. So I want to try to keep this as minimal as possible, but helping you out as best as possible. Okay. So characteristics of an animal. All right. One, the main thing that separates us from animals and plants, okay, is that we are heterotrophs, meaning we do not make our own food. We need to consume others. Also, we are part of the kingdom Animalia. We are eukaryotic, and we lack a cell wall. Okay, so those are just characteristics. Now, these are all generalities because you have, some examples that maybe not all animals of a certain group fall in line with. Okay, so first off, I want to talk about the different types of animals. Okay, so here you have a cladogram. These cladograms here are going to help you understand what makes these animals different. Okay, here is a chart here. Yes, you do need to know this chart. I will be asking questions about this chart, so I would write it down. Okay, so that way you can memorize it and look into and use it. Okay, but pretty much as you go here, this from left to right and then skipping down here, you are basing it on complexity, okay? And that's what this is happening here on this cladogram. All right, so this cladogram here is showing that you have the most simple here being sponges. If you look, they don't have anything. They have specialized cells. That's pretty much it. Then you have cnidarians here, which are now going to have tissues and radial symmetry. So if you look here, special cells, tissues, radial, and they have two germ layers, so they don't have a third germ layer yet, and that's going to be pretty much growing in complexity as you go through this. So invertebrates are anything, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, you have 8 phyla of, or 8 categories of invertebrates, going from sponges to echinoderms, and then you have what are chordates. Now, chordates are going to all at some point in their growth are going to go through 4 different stages or 4 different characteristics that will make them be considered a chordate. Okay, those being a dorsal hollow nerve cord, what is called a notochord, a tail that extends, and pharyngeal pouches. So chordates are going to have some sort of pharyngeal pouches. Okay, pharyngeal pouches, we're talking about lungs here. So these are going to breathe in some other fashion. They don't need some sort of lung, usually just through the skin. Okay, where chordates are going to have a little bit more complex structures, as those being organs. Notochord in humans, that being the spinal cord, the dorsal hollow, that being the vertebrae, and we do have a tailbone, which does extend past the anus, but it's just fused together in the pelvis. And that is called your pelvic, or your coccyx bone, or what we call your tailbone. All right. So going into 26. It goes into a little diversity of these. Look at your quizzes for this as far as examples. Now, some of these may have different names. Arthropods are the same. Echinoderms, Echinodermata, same thing. Annelids, same thing. Mollusca, same thing. Platyhelminthes are flatworms. Cnidarians, porifera are sponges, and round worms are going to be called nematodes. Okay, Same thing. These are examples of these. So an example of a platyhelminthes, flatworm. An example of a nematode, roundworm, and so forth. So you will see examples there as far as what example or what type of animal belongs to a echinoderm. Okay, you may see starfish, grasshopper, earthworm, snail. All right, so those are examples that you may see. This is just talking about kind of some similarities and characteristics that are what somewhat similar to or different than all of those. Okay, then you have chordates, or what we call vertebrates. Okay, those that have a backbone, tunicates, lancelets. Now this is another cladogram, so here you have the same thing, simplest to most complex, and going through here, fish making up the majority of it. You have tunicates and lancelets going all the way to lungfish here, so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different types of what you would be considered fish. Okay, I guess you can argue lampreys and hagfishes. These aren't here, but you definitely have 4 here with sharks and their relatives: rayfin, colanex, these ones, lobefin, lungfishes here. All right, so you just kind of see the complexity. No skeletal column or no skeletal system for the most part. Then you have bones. Then you have more of a fleshy type exterior, and then you have lungs. Okay, now you have more structures here with amphibians, which are frogs and toads, and salamanders and caecilians, I believe is what it's called. Okay, here's the key here to help you understand. So important for you is just showing the kind of diversity of these. Once again, asking questions as far as this animal belongs to which group. And that's going to be, for the most part, the majority of what that is going to look like. It's just talking about diversity. There's really nothing to it. So you don't need to get into too much detail there. You're just going to have to understand that. And usually I'd give a handout of some sort for you to see, but most likely you'll have pictures and stuff on your test. So this is going to be useful for you on your test. Okay, and the majority of your test, or I guess coming from the chapters, is going to be that of for the plant for animals. Remember, about 50 questions from animals, which is not a lot. You have about 25 questions each chapter. You have 5 chapters, so you have 125 questions that I'm going to break it down. So a majority of that is going to come from these 2 chapters, chapter 27, animal systems, and chapter 28, animal systems as well. All right, so going into it, first we're going to talk about digestion. Okay, not going to cover too much. Herbivores eat plants, carnivores eat meat, omnivores eat both, detritivores eat detritus, filter feeders filter their food, and so forth. That's pretty simple, but what we do need to know is that your teeth can help determine your diet. So you see a carnivore here is going to have teeth that are sharp, used to hold on to their prey and also rip it apart. Herbivores are going to have more of a flat teeth, and that's going to be used to pretty much grind up the food because they're eating plants. They need to try to grind up that cellulose in the plant wall and try to break it down. So digestion here. Reason for this. 1, remember, we're heterotrophs, so we have to consume other organisms, whether it's a plant, which is an organism, it is a living organism, okay, as well as an animal. So therefore, we have to obtain energy, okay. So your diet can be seen through pretty much what type of teeth you have. Then you have respiration, okay. Respiration is pretty much just gas exchange. All living organisms are going to do cell respiration, okay? But how is it that we get the oxygen from the air into the individual cells? Well, this is the pharyngeal pouches that we kind of talked about. For the most part, you have lungs, gills, either external or internal gills. You also have what are called trachea, seen a lot in animals or spiracles or things like that, which are pretty much these like slits for the most part. Okay, but what you need to know is that it needs moist environment. Okay, so it needs to have a moist environment in order for the gas exchange to occur, and the larger the surface area, the better. So that's why in humans we have what are called alveolar sac. Okay, these like kind of little grape-like structures that are going to cause an increase in surface area, and that's going to allow for gas exchange to occur. Okay, you have examples here. You have external gills, internal gills. These are going to be kind of gills, pretty much these feathered-like structures so that the water passes through. Most aquatic animals are going to have gills, unless you're some aquatic reptiles and some aquatic mammals. You're going to have lungs, but you're pretty much holding your breath. Here you can breathe underwater because a couple different reasons. One is having to deal with here is that you have only one pump that's going to be used of your circulatory system, but you don't need the air to cause you to you're getting the water, or sorry, you're getting the oxygen out of the water rather than out of the air here. So you're filtering out the oxygen from the water, where here you're filtering out the oxygen from the air and not necessarily the water. So the circulatory system, okay, you have two types. You have either an open or a closed system. These are both closed systems here. An open system would be these here, this purple area is gone, okay? And pretty much what happens is it just flows into these areas and it just builds up until finally it goes back into this and it goes back into the heart, and then it gets pumped out again. The reason for the heart is to pump it to the lungs, or it's the pharyngeal pouches, in order to get oxygen, and then that way it can deliver oxygen. All right, now you have two different systems. You have fish, or what is called a single loop. You can see there's a single loop. You have this ventricle here, which is going to always pump blood out to the body. Okay, systemic capillaries, those are going to be the body. That's going to be out to the body. This is a very basic example. So these are all the blood vessels and stuff to the body. First, it's going to the gills. Okay, it's going to pick up oxygen through the water in the gills, and then out to the body, deliver that, and then back to the atrium or back to the heart. So fish, you only have a two valve or two chambered heart, okay, and it only requires one pump, okay, a single pump, and you can get blood throughout, oxygenated blood there. Now we're looking here for most reptiles, birds, and mammals. You have a 4-chamber or 3-chamber heart. A 3-chamber heart is going to be a ventricle here that shares both oxygen and deoxygenated blood. All right, but if you're looking here, atrium is always going to receive blood. Ventricle is always going to pump out blood. So if we're looking here, blood from the system is going to go into the heart here. What is the right atrium? Now it's on the left side, but it's the right atrium because it is what is called the anatomical position. Basically, it's a mirror image. Okay, so blood is returned to the right atrium, pumped into the right ventricle, then out into the lungs to get oxygen, back into the left atrium, and then pumped out. So you have two circuits going here. One is called the pulmonary circuit, or one loop there, and then you have the second being the systemic or the systemic circuit, and that is the second loop there. So if you had a third, or if you only had three, you're pretty much sharing both oxygen and deoxygenated. This is a mammal. Okay, there is no sharing of a oxygen or oxygen and deoxygenated blood. It is kept separately and more efficient that way. There are no pumps in the world that work as efficiently as your heart. Okay, fun fact for you. The next system being that of the urinary system. Okay, the urinary system is pretty much how your body is going to eliminate waste. Okay, now this is a little different than your digestive system, because remember, your digestive system, we're talking about things entering your body. Okay, what exits your body after you eat it never actually got into your body. So this is what happens when things get into your body. That mainly happening. So you eat. Okay, you eat food, you gain nutrients, you breathe in oxygen, you deliver that oxygen, you deliver that nutrients to cells. Then you have what is metabolic process, pretty much making proteins, breaking down stuff, building stuff. It's all good and gravy. But what happens in this bioprocess is you get waste. Okay, that waste mainly being ammonia, which is toxic. So how does your body get rid of ammonia? Okay, in humans, we urinate. Okay, we urine, or in our urine is what is called urea, which is we take ammonia and break that down, or change that into urea, which is less toxic, and then we can get rid of it. Most animals are going to either do it with urea or uric acid. Okay, most invertebrates, okay, are going to just pretty much diffuse it through their skin. Okay, so they're going to sweat that ammonia out, if you want to build an image, I guess. So they'll sweat that image out, or that ammonia out. All right, now I do want to talk about here freshwater versus marine animals. This just has to deal with understanding osmosis. Okay, freshwater, no salt content. The actual fish itself, higher salt content. All right, so therefore what's going to happen is water here is going to flow into, remember, water always follows salt. Therefore, water is going to go into the animal, okay, into the fish. That's why you don't see it drinks. Okay, it doesn't take in food or water here. Why? Because it's just going into the animal already. Okay, and when it urinates and gets rid of this, it's controlling the water volume and the salt concentration. So therefore, it's going to be a very diluted urine, meaning very low salt concentration, very high water concentration. Why? Simply because there's so much water going in. And you see here, so much water going in. All right, it has to actively uptake the ions to help with that. All right, and it's just the opposite for marine animals, okay, or a saltwater animal. You just kind of flip-flop these. So if you're looking here, water is going to flow out. Why? Because there's a higher salt concentration in the water. Okay, so once again, water follows salt. That's why you see it drinking both water and salt, okay, as well as the food. And then it's actively trying to secrete that salt there. All right, so that's pretty much what is happening. It's going to convert it. Invertebrates diffuse the ammonia through their skin for the most part. And then chordates are either going to do it, convert it into uric acid, or they're going to convert it into urea and then deposit it that way. Okay, whether it's through their kidneys, usually are the structures in which that's going to happen. And they all kind of look a little bit differently. So going into animal systems again, we're going to talk nervous system. These are kind of different cephalization or pretty much just nervous systems of animals. You have a cnidarian here, which is a hydra. It's going to use a nerve net. A platyhelminthes, which is using nerve cords. Earthworms here, peripheral nerves, and a central nervous system. So you get this cephalization, which is this collection here. You get mollusks here, which actually have a brain and a little bit more branching there. You have arthropods, ventral nerve cord here. you get starfish here, but you get echinoderms, which have what are called nerve ribs and a radial nerve. And then you have chordates, which are going to use a brain central nervous system, and that's typical of what you would expect. Now, remember, a porifera or a sponge are not on here. They don't have tissues. Remember, this is pretty much tissues and organs that we're talking about. But if you notice, okay, they are spread out pretty much throughout all the body, and the reason for that is they're going to respond to stimulus from the environment as well as inside, and then also they're going to respond to that. All right, so not only are they going to receive it, but they're going to respond to it. So there's always some sort of structure to receive, a structure to interpret it, and a structures to respond. Okay, and that here is the response is usually based off some sort of muscular skeleton type response. That's how you move. Okay, so that being said, you have three types of skeleton. Endoskeleton, here you have the bones on the inside, an exoskeleton, bones on the outside, and what is called a hydrostatic skeleton, or a water-filled skeleton, pretty much just based on water pressure. No actual bones or anything like that, or hard structure. It's just the pressure of the contents, pretty much water inside the animal, that's going to cause it. Okay. Then what happens is you have muscles, and skeleton or bones work together. Muscles attach to the bone. Muscles contract, moving the bone. Therefore, you get movement. Okay. Joints are where bones come together. Okay. Ligaments attach bone to bone. Tendons attach muscle to bone. Okay. Muscles work in pairs because they can only contract, and the only way to relax the muscle is to contract another muscle. So an example, your bicep is going to contract. If you do that, you do a curl, right? So you're flexing your elbow, decreasing the angle, or lifting your hand up, and your bicep is only going to stay there by itself. It's not actively going to be able to relax. In order to do that, you have to flex, or you have to contract your triceps. So that's why you're able to, you're not stuck in one position or anything like that. Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about, okay, is going to be that of reproduction. Okay, I want to go over some of this different types of reproduction. You have oviparity or oviparous, ovoviviparous, and viviparity. Okay, oviparity is it's going to lay eggs. Okay, so organisms, you see this. Pretty much what this means is oviparous is it is developed outside of the mother. Okay. So does it lay eggs? Yes. Okay, type of fertilization, either external or internal, doesn't matter. Just what's happening, okay, is it's developing outside of the embryo. So usually in some sort of eggs, okay, which would make sense. That's why you see there. Therefore, outside the mother, all right. Ovoviviparous is an egg inside the mother. Okay, so as reptiles and amphibians, you do have some sharks, things like that, are ovoviviparous. That's an internal fertilization, would make sense because it's inside the mother. Okay, no placental connection, and that's because they do not provide, the mother does not provide nutrients for the development of the young. Okay, they get it from an egg yolk. Therefore, they are going to lay eggs, meaning those eggs being pretty much inside of the organism until it, hatches or gives birth to it. Okay, and then you have viviparity or viviparous, and that's going to be developed inside the mother, and it's going to gain nutrients from the mother. So no eggs here, internal fertilization. You have some reptiles, fish, amphibians, and mammals that you will see there for some types of viviparous type animals. Okay, let me take a look here. Yeah. So homeostasis, we're gonna go into homeostasis here. Pretty much what you need to know is that all the structures, all 10 of those structures, 11 if you separate muscle system and skeletal system, are going to work together in order to maintain homeostasis. You don't maintain homeostasis, guess what? You die. Okay, and that's what happens with sickness, illness, and death, is that your body can no longer maintain homeostasis, and then therefore you start to get cell death, which leads to tissue death, which leads to organ death, which leads to organ systems failing, and then eventually organ. So it's kind of this trickle effect. So it starts off with all organ systems working together. Okay, and many of the times, if you are sick or you know some injured or some sort of homeostasis that's not happening, there's multiple things from other systems that can help. It's usually not a simple fix-all solution. Okay, one of the things in the animal kingdom that separates a lot, or classifies a lot, I should say, is whether it's an ectotherm or an endotherm. So looking at this chart here, an ectotherm here, this blue, is going to be known as cold-blooded, mainly because, where is it? Here you go. So it's going to regulate their body temperature with the use of external temperature sources. What does that mean? It's going to use the environment. Okay, so it's going to use the environment in order to regulate its temperature. Now, all invertebrates, ectotherms, okay, and then you can see here you have include invertebrates, like I just said, fish, amphibians, and reptiles. So they're relying on the environment to heat them up in order for them to eat, okay, and work and things like that. So they do not have a high metabolic rate, so therefore they require less food, and also they can only survive at in certain areas. Okay, that being, they can't survive in cold areas. Where endotherms they generate their own heat, they eat more, they have high metabolic rates. You only create about 10% of the energy from what you eat is generated into energy. The other 90% of energy from what you eat is released as heat. So that's why endotherms are able to maintain their temperature, because metabolism is continuing to happen. So that's the difference between ectotherms. Endotherms, they can have a wide variety of environmental conditions, more geologically distributed, but they do have to eat more. These animals include birds and mammals. So that's chapter 28. Let's go into animal behavior. Here's a good concept map here. Okay, it's really, we're talking about animal behavior in the environment and animal behavior, pretty much learned behavior versus innate behaviors. Okay, so you have examples here. Innate behaviors are going to be common in animals. These are going to be called animal instincts. They're born with it. It's genetic. That's what they're going to have. What else? Learned behaviors are going to be more so things that they learned. Now, there's different types of learned behaviors. Those being habituation, meaning requiring the habitat around, as far as understanding warning signs, things like that. Certain things that are, may or may not affect you. So you learn those behaviors. An example of that would be birds on the side of the road. Car flies by, drives by, they fly away. Same birds land again. Drives by, they fly away. Okay, same thing happens eventually where the birds understand, okay, this car is driving by, but I'm not in any danger, and the bird stays there. You have classical conditioning, which is called Pavlov's dog, where dogs will salivate to food. They ring the triangle to feed them, and ultimately through a process, when you ring the triangle for feeding time for dog, that dog will then salivate at the ringing of the triangle based on seeing food. Okay, you have operant conditioning where there's some sort of reward for some sort of um, uh, behavior. Okay, an example of that would be if you give a dog a treat, if it sits or does something like that, the dog's going to want to continue to do that until it gets a treat all the time. And then finally, insight learning, which is pretty much using pre-learned to situations. So stuff you've learned in the past to situations. All right, so knowing and understanding examples of those of learned behaviors, innate behaviors. Then you have complex behaviors, which is just both of these. Okay, just putting both of these together. Now, understanding it in the wild or in the environment, how's that? One is you're going to have behavioral cycles, seasonal or daily. An example of a daily cycle is you going to sleep, you're going to work during the day, or to school during the day, sleep at night. That is called a circadian rhythm. Okay, that is a behavioral cycle. Also, you see this a lot with migration and seasons and things like that. Birds, other animals are going to migrate to warmer weather in the winter where it's less harsh on them. So that way they can be able to survive more, or to reproduce in a certain time, or to eat at a certain time. But that's pretty much what's going to happen. You have social behaviors. You have courtship to find a mate, building homes, things like that to build society, protection here, fighting rivals, hunting. Those are all considered types of social behaviors. Hunting here, a lot of times it's a socially type of behavior as they work, just kind of like war. You have strategy and stuff like that. Protection, same thing. In societies, same thing. Competition and aggression. This is talking more so like territory. So when you get territorial, you're looking at competition and aggressive or aggression. And then finally, communication. You have visual signs, anything from colors to usually colors is what's going to be used. So birds that are more colorful, or frogs, or an example is a peacock that puts its feathers up. Chemical signals, releasing pheromones, things like that will communicate somehow. Ants, they do it all the time with ants. That's why you see a trail of ants. It's never like a wave of ants. It's just a single line trail of ants for the most part, until they get around to the food and then they go haywire. But sounds, those being like mating, songs, calls, things like that. Somehow they're communicating through that. And then if they are more of the complex species, they can have some sort of language, and that's some sort of guide with rules and stuff like that the animals of that species kind of know. So that's animal behavior. Once again, follow along. This is your last one of the year. I just want to tell you thank you. I enjoyed this year. I appreciate the patience and the adaptations through this difficult 2020 year already. Hopefully next year is much better, and looking forward to seeing you guys all grow, students and as people. Enjoy your summer.